Oh, wait. Welcome back, everyone. A little bit of a poor audio situation right there, but I think that happens at a lot of shows. Not the poor audio, but, you enter the show, maybe a second or so of no volume, and then we get started. This is just kind of a gut reaction to the Cotton Bowl. To Ohio State, I think, earning I'm not going to call it the biggest win of Ryan Day's career. I still think that's 2020 over Clemson, given how dominant of a win that was. The quality of opponent factored in as well. I think 2020 Clemson probably would be viewed as a better team than Texas, but this ranks up there. This also ranks up there with 2025 Oregon. So the fact that Day has earned two career level wins in a single season, I think is important. I went very back and forth with this game. Before kickoff, I said if I could redo my predictions, I would pick Texas, but I said if I could, I wasn't sending out a PSA that I picked Texas to win. On my stream for the Penn State game and with Corn Crazed, I said that Ohio State would win 21-17, and I said in my initial preview and prediction video that Ohio State would win 24-17. If you watch college football with Sam, you will know that I have struggled with picking Ohio State this year, and that's because they've been wildly inconsistent. And I also emphasize the importance of the offensive line, and that's been the area where Ohio State has been inconsistent. And they were very inconsistent there tonight. I said in my Discord server, which you all should join, by the way, via the link in the description, I said that they wouldn't run for 4 yards per carry, and alas, Ohio State didn't run for 4 yards per carry. To be fair, their backs actually did, but the sacks bring that down. And as for Texas, their backs did not run for 4 yards per carry, but they too were affected by some key sacks. Both D-lines really won against both offensive lines, and it was typically the speed of the backs because both Ohio State and Texas have very quick, very fast backs who are good at making cuts and good at seeing the field, especially with Ohio State. So, all that being said, I thought throughout the game that was probably my best called Ohio State game of the season. I basically told you exactly how it would go, minus the defensive touchdown from Ohio State, which was just an incredible play by Jack Sawyer, who got around Cameron Williams, a future NFL tackle, and that's because Jack Sawyer's the most NFL-ready defensive end and one of the more NFL-ready defensive players on the team. If we're being honest, he's an X-Factor player. He's a non-negotiable. I'm very close to saying he's an alien. He's really stepped up his play this season. And then when you look at that play before half, which, that right there was the epitome of the game. The Travion Henderson 75-yard touchdown before the half. If that play doesn't happen, and it's 7-7 entering the half, or Steve Sarkisian doesn't decide to go for a halfback sweep and pounds it up the middle with his O-line that in the second half was winning a little bit, Texas probably wins. But that's really, again, the epitome of the game in the sense that a few plays, like 1 or 2 or 3, and really I would say that same amount of yards decided the game in a large part. If they run it up the middle again, Texas maybe gets another touchdown. I mean, Ohio State, you never know because how good their D-line is, but with how Texas was running at times in that game in the short yardage, I'd imagine, they probably get in if they try and pound it up the middle and say we're going to try and out-physical you, like they did in the third quarter or for much of the third quarter. There was, the play where Henderson took it 75 yards to the house, and there was a Texas defender within a yard of him. But the blocking was good up front. That was probably the best play from Ohio State's O-line the whole game was on that halfback screen pass. Good call there. It's not aggressive, so you're not putting the ball in harm's way. But if Texas's defense is undisciplined, you'll get a big gain off of it, and maybe then you can be aggressive. So that was the correct call there by Ohio State. And that was the moral of the story, really. If this game was to be told as like an ancient folktale, the moral of the story is make sure that you control the controllables, because Ohio State did. They responded to adversity in a better way, and at the end of the day, they made less self-inflicting errors. I mean, both of these teams did not play clean games. Ohio State had 9 penalties for 75 yards. Texas had 5 for 54. Texas had 2 turnovers, a fumble that was lost and an interception that was thrown. Ohio State had 1 turnover. Both teams had fewer than 400 yards, more than 300, though. They didn't score 30 points, though. None of these teams scored 30 points. And if you take away the defensive touchdown, neither team scored more than 21 points on offense. So it was a really close game, and it reminded me a lot, if I'm being honest. And if you're a Texas fan, this is where I think it's a bit concerning. It reminded me a lot of Penn State versus Ohio State the previous 2 years, where Penn State had opportunities to win. Maybe if they approach the game differently, they end up winning. But at the end of the day, Ryan Day calls the better plays than Franklin does. His team makes mistakes against Penn State. Penn State plays them close, but he comes out with the win because he's the better coach and they had the better game plan. And because Penn State is not more talented than Ohio State, in fact, they're not as talented, so they have to really outcoach Ohio State to win, not just coach equally, they lose. And it's a similar case with Texas, although Texas is more talented than Penn State in a lot of areas. Although I will say Penn State probably has the better offensive line. In terms of NFL talent, no. In terms of actual collegiate execution, abso-freaking-lutely. Just watch the games where Texas received more pressure from Ohio State than Penn State did, and they ran the ball about similar. Penn State, I would say, in fact, ran the ball a little bit better. It's just Texas actually has a QB who can play well in big games, and I thought Quinn did an okay job tonight, Quinn Ewers, and they actually have receivers. If Penn State had Texas-level receivers, they might win it all. But instead what we have now is the national championship game, which this is not going to be a preview of the national championship game. We're going to do that tomorrow. We're going live tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll be talking about the national championship, and I'll give my early preview, my early prediction. We'll also talk about the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl more, zoom in on the teams participating there, and do some other things too. But Ohio State opened up as a 10-point favorite over Notre Dame, guys. They're far and away the favorite to win it all. Far and away the favorite too. And the reason I picked them to win this game is the similar reason why I'm probably going to pick them to beat Notre Dame. Is just they're the better team, and there isn't enough of a coaching edge or talent edge one way or another for, well, not one way or another. It's the fact that Ohio State had better coaching than Texas, was more consistent throughout the regular season. It's the same thing with Notre Dame. So once again, Ohio State's a really well-coached team. They're an elite team relative to this year. I think that this game showed that this team's not 2019 LSU, that the first 2 playoff games were more of matchups and catching the other team with their pants down than this team just being, quote-unquote different. But at the same time, that's irrelevant because you win the national championship, you win it all. And day teams have been here before. I mean, they've been to the national championship game before. The difference is they ran up against 2020 Bama, one of the greatest teams of all time. Notre Dame is not that. And we don't know who will win that game, but Ohio State's favored by 10 for a reason. In 2022, they make the field goal against Georgia. They win it all. They're not losing to TCU. I've been a day defender for years now, and some people have said, "Oh, maybe I'm a Michigan fan," although that hasn't come up quite too often, which I appreciate. Ohio State football fans have been very, very respectful of the channel, and I appreciate that, even when I'm very critical of them. We don't just have a large contingent of Buckeye fans, we have a large contingent of logical Buckeye fans. And that is what you want. You want fanatics and fans from whether casual fans or fanatical fans from all fan bases, but ones who can have logic and don't make stupid takes. Like, I guarantee you in my comments section, you will see very few, if any, comments from Ohio State fans saying, oh, that was an easy win and we blew them out, because they watched the game. They know that you change one or two plays, I think Texas wins this game here. This was another great semifinal, just like the Orange Bowl yesterday. It was a game made by inches. And before we resume, I just want to shout out SFS Inverted, who's a super fan of the channel. He's on Patreon. He works hard as like an aircraft engineer. Just wanted to mention that to, personalize him. So it's not like I'm just talking about him like he's a robot, but he truly is awesome. He's always active in the Discord server. He helps out the channel a lot with modding and, engaging with other fans, which just actually helps make me money to a certain degree. So I want to shout him out for that. And also for the $10 super chat. First of all, let's insert, TV bleep for curse word here. Go. Second, hats off to Texas defense. They locked us up. I mean, yes, Jeremiah Smith, guys, Jeremiah Smith is still probably one of the best receiver prospects of all time, if not the best all time. Texas's secondary did something, and I was an advocate for the fact that Texas's defense was going to hold this team to under 30. In fact, I thought it was incredibly unlikely that Ohio State would score more than 30 points. And I think if you simulate this game over and over and over again, there's probably not even 1 out of 10 outcomes where Ohio State scores 30 points here. Why is that? Because Ohio State, when they face an elite D line, when they face a defense that's built like Penn State's, Nebraska's, and Michigan's, where Ohio State beat 2 of those teams, but the 2 wins were close, and the one loss, one of the 2 they suffered all year, was very close. They don't score over 30. They're kind of incapable of scoring over 30 when you have a defense of this build with good coaching going up against them. And it's not because Will Howard's a bad QB. He's not. He's one of the best QBs in the country. He outplayed Quinn on an average basis tonight. It's not because of the wide receivers. Wide receivers are not the problem whatsoever. I mean, they had some drops tonight, but they also made some good plays. Not even tight end's a huge problem. It's not elite, but tight end is not important naturally to Ohio State's offense. It's kind of an extra, and it works with G. Scott Jr. Running back is certainly not the problem. It's the O-line, and also the fact that since Howard is not Cam Newton and he's not Deshaun Watson, and he's just a great near elite QB, not a generational QB, that when the O-line breaks down, he kind of breaks down. But that's like 99% of QBs here. It's not because Ohio State's offense is bad or overrated. It's matchups, which is why you should follow the channel, because we identify that. We're pretty good at identifying that. Even when we're wrong about game predictions, you'll hear stuff that I'm right about in terms of matchups in deep dives or normal game previews. Texas locked OSU up. Jeremiah Smith only had 3 receiving yards. And Will Howard, while he outplayed Quinn, did not have a perfect game. I think the 90 QBR that he got from ESPN is more because of Travion Henderson having that really long touchdown pass. Not really him having a great night. He had a good night, though. Not a great one, but good. And the defense for Ohio State, we've known this, but the defense for OSU, and I think the defense for Texas are basically one and the same. After this game, I can't exactly say what defense is better, because I think Ohio State's offense is clearly better than Texas, and I thought this game showed that too. Texas has a much better offensive line in terms of run blocking, and yet Ohio State's offense looked more natural in a lot of ways. Like they scored in different ways. They had 2 very long drives. They had that explosivity with the screen pass that you didn't see from Texas all day long. So I think if you want to tell me that maybe Texas has the better defense than OSU after this game, I'll listen to you, but Ohio State's the better team. So good. It's a good win for Ohio State. I'll get to another opinion in a minute. But let's talk to Justin Ziegler first. Thank you, Justin Ziegler, for the $20 super chat. Was this more Day finally taking that final step or Sark having another one of his moments in big games? Regardless, great on that Ohio State pass rush. Freeman needs to outcoach Day to have a shot. What happens what happens to Ewers. Ewers is who he is. If Ewers makes some better passes too, and has some of the accuracy that Howard displayed at times, Texas wins. Texas in this game was truly either a QB or one more competent play away from winning. And that's what makes it painful if you're a Texas fan, and also kind of juicy if you're an OSU fan, to know that maybe there is a world where you lose, but you won. You won one of those close games. It's an all-time classic type game that you win. And it's good to win those. It is. I mean, I'm a Michigan fan. I've experienced those close wins where, like the Rose Bowl against Alabama, where you hate it throughout the whole game, but at the end you're like, wow, I appreciated the fact that it was close and we were the team that came out on top. I think the truth's somewhere in the middle. I don't think Day, in this instance, is different from the coach that he's been since probably 2022, where ever since then he's been willing to make change, he's been adapting, and I'll even go further back. Day's no different from the coach he was in 2020, where he started hot in that playoff, and the only reason they didn't win it all that year is because they ran into one of the, like, S&P Plus has 2020 Alabama as the best team in college football since the Bowl Alliance. S&P Plus thinks 2020 Bama's better than 2021 Miami. He just ran into one of the greatest teams of all time, and because he had some injuries and Ohio State had some issues that year, like they have had every year since really 2019, they folded. And that's not really a fault on him in large part, because when you run into a GOAT caliber team, you shouldn't be thrashed for losing to a GOAT caliber team. That's not how college football works. That's in the mindset of everyone's either elite or terrible, and we don't subscribe to that on this channel. I do think it was more, and I've said this for a while, I don't trust Sark, which was another, I trust Day more than I trust Sark too. In fact, my intuition behind picking Texas, which I didn't pick Texas, but I said in a tweet that I thought, if I could redo this again, I'd pick Texas, mainly because of how much public money was behind Ohio State. So knowing that Vegas kind of needed Texas to cover to make money, and they usually make money. So kind of maybe overthinking it a little, you could say, but still I think this game showed that could have existed. Like, it wasn't a bad thought process. But I said in my videos that I trust Day more than Sark. I do. He's in the regular season and their seasons at their respective schools, he's been a better game manager. Day's problem, with the exception of a few games against Michigan, has not really been about game management. It's been about roster construction. That's OSU's problem right now. It straight up is. I mean, the O-line should be better than it is, both in development and in the amount of bodies there. If this Ohio State team has a good O-line, like just good, not even elite, they're probably 16-0. Like, they're probably favored by 13.5 or 14 over Notre Dame, and not just 10. And they probably beat Michigan, and they probably beat Oregon, even with some of those same issues they had in those games. I do agree that I think Notre Dame needs to massively outcoach OSU to win, and I think that Ewers. But also keep in mind that 2023 OSU by the end of the year was like a national title caliber team, and Notre Dame could have and probably should have beaten them in South Bend. So I don't want to act like Notre Dame cannot win. They can. In fact, my intuition tells me that 10 is too big of a number, but I could be wrong on that intuitive thought, and I'd certainly favor OSU there. But thank you, Justin Ziegler, for that $20 super chat. I think that, look, Ewers had the second best game against this Ohio State defense that anyone's had all year. Number one was Gabriel the first time around. In this game, I was more impressed by Texas's wide receivers than I was Ewers, because Texas's wide receivers were consistently getting open. Credit to Sark and credit to the receivers. I mean, that secondary for Texas, not for Texas, for OSU, that secondary for OSU does have issues relative to being the best secondary in the country. Like, I think that Texas probably has a better secondary after watching what I watched, but regardless of that, Ohio State won. I think that Ohio State is... Where's Ohio State better at? They're better at wide receiver. They're better at quarterback. They're better at running back. They're better at in-game decision-making. I would say overall, they are... Where are they better again? I would say that Ohio State is better at D-end. Well, I'd have to... It's so close. They're probably better at one of D-end or D-tackle. And I would say they're better at safety. But corners easily Texas. And linebacker's pretty close. I mean, Anthony Hill Jr. and David Benda were playing with their feet on fire. It was the same thing with Cody Simon, of course, in this game. Like, those three linebackers are among the nation's best, especially Anthony Hill Jr. and Cody Simon. Okay, King Kavosha, thank you for the $2 super chat. Since everyone is donating, I appreciate you, King Kavosha. Okay, Justin Ziegler, to go back to what you were saying, what happens to Quinn Ewers? I don't know. I think that Texas can do better. But at the same time, Quinn Ewers is a top 20 QB. And I don't know if Arch Manning's ready. But Manning's a 5-star and Manning has mobility. And a mobile QB would have helped Texas to win this game. Like, it would have taken less sacks, would have extended plays, would have helped out the ground game. I think you roll with Arch Manning because both are on the payroll. That frees you up some money to, get better players or retain better players, for example. See Ohio State fans talking about how they're exhausted. The defense, another goal line stand. I don't think this goal line stand was as epic as the Penn State one or the whatchamacallit? Gosh. The Michigan one, where it was like 4th and 1 and they stopped him. Solely because you run that sweep with how Texas runs the ball against any top 10 defense that results in a TFL, like probably a 3-yard, 4-yard, maybe even same 7-yard TFL, because that was an awful play call. That was one of the worst play calls I've seen in the playoff. But what was epic about that was really the Sawyer fumble recovery for 6. That was the memory right there. Yeah. So, okay. We've been live for a while, and I'm going to continue ranting and talking about all this, and then we'll eventually get to the point where I'm going to do my more detailed statistical reaction, and then that will release tomorrow in video form. It'll be 20 minutes, this morning's video about Penn State losing to Notre Dame. They should have beaten Notre Dame, but they didn't, because James Franklin's James Franklin. And, yeah, it's just horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. That is the comfort if you're Ohio State. That's one area where if I got to criticize Chris Drew, I will. Chris has been on the channel. We'll have him on the channel again. He enjoys coming on here. Ryan Day being the Michael Jordan of James Franklin's, I think, is not a good take. But that's just a disagreement I have with him. If you want to criticize any of my takes, you absolutely can, because I'm, for example, the idiot who said that Oregon was going to beat Ohio State the second time around. And 34-0. I don't want to talk about it. I do because it's fun, but that's just pointing out an area of disagreement I have with some. Because he said that. He's probably changed his mind, though, so I'm going to recant that criticism, I imagine. I'll ask him that, actually, the next time, and I'll tell him that I said I disagreed with him when I have him on. Say, hey, do you still buy that? Because even if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame, somehow, I don't think you can say that. James Franklin is a meme because he's never won a big game, ever outside of the 2016 season. Day wins big games every year. It's just whether it's the biggest game or a game against a GOAT caliber team that he loses. And that's different from what James Franklin does. And some will point out, oh, well, what do the recruiting rankings say? Penn State's roster this year is about as good as Texas's, which means it's about as good as Ohio State's. Penn State's roster this year was elite. Like, you give Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter and Sharon Moore that roster, they probably win it all this year. Heck, you give Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Jim Knowles Penn State's roster, they probably don't lose to Michigan because they're better in the trenches. They probably go 15-1 or 16-0 and win it all with Penn State's roster. Like, seriously. Ryan Day's better than James Franklin. He's better than Steve Sarkisian. He is only, in my mind, behind Kirby Smart in terms of head coaches right now. And he has his team on... Oh, yeah, exactly. So, thank you, DeMoney5675. Yeah, I'm the idiot who picked Nebraska to make the Big Ten title game in 2022. We all have idiotic takes. And I kind of wear mine on my sleeve because I don't want to act disingenuous, like I know everything and I call everything correctly. But yeah, I'm the idiot who said that. I even this year, where I think I picked Nebraska to go 9-3, and that was pretty reasonable. I think they went 6-6. Like I always over. Justin Ziegler, if you gave Freeman Penn State's roster with his set of coordinators, they win it all. They win it all. Because Denbrock would actually have like somewhat of a passing offense to work with. He doesn't. Notre Dame's passing offense is inferior to Penn State's. It's just in that specific game, Penn State's secondary played one of their worst games of the year. It's a secondary that I think I overrated. And Leonard and Steve Angeli combined for actually having a pretty competent passing game. So I think if you gave Notre Dame's current coaching staff Penn State's roster, I think they win it all. I've been high on Penn State's roster all season long. All the games I've watched them in, I feel vindicated on that. It's just I should have remembered that it's James Franklin, and James Franklin in big games, I think with the exception of the Notre Dame game where I thought he coached better than he did against Oregon and Ohio State, but still something had to go wrong, and Tom Allen said, you know what, James, you're going to call a good game, so how about over here, I now drink the beer and pee down my leg and lose the game for you. Yeah, like, it just... Call it what it is. You said it best. When it comes down to Franklin beating Day, it will happen at some point, but I will believe it when I see it. And look, next year they have a good opportunity, because this is something I'm going to talk about here, and I'm going to talk about tomorrow. I'm not going to spend too much time on it now, but I'll talk about it tomorrow. Ohio State should fire Justin Fry. And if they do, they have an opportunity to kickstart the next great college football dynasty, because they have a good culture, they recruit very well, they develop well. I'm not completely recanting my criticisms of Larry Johnson and or Mickey Marotti, but I think after this year, I don't think firing them or letting them go is a necessity. In fact, I think that as the seasons progressed, I was wrong about my Larry Johnson notion that he should retire. But at the same time, maybe it's Knowles' scheme totally taking over and LJ's kind of just being a recruiter. But anyway, he's recruiting at a high level. He's recruiting well. His position units played exceptionally well down the stretch. I'm recanting my opinion that he should go. With Mickey Marotti, with how the D-line's playing and how this team's tackling and how they're physical and they're big, everywhere except for the offensive line, I don't think it's a Mickey Marotti problem. I think it's exclusively a Justin Fry problem. And someone told me to let it go because Ohio State just keeps winning, but that's not how this works. I mean, Michigan went 13-1 in 2022. They destroyed Ohio State in Columbus. They won the Big Ten. In an alternate universe, that team goes 15-0 and beats TCU and probably escapes against Georgia in like a very close game. They were that good. They went 13-1. They fired their linebackers coach when their defense was playing. You know, their defense was a top 5 unit, not number 1. Like the 2023 unit was, but they were, top 5, minimum top 10. They fire their linebackers coach. Why? because you want to get better. You want to capitalize on your opportunities. When you see someone who can be better than what you have, you typically go for it in the coaching industry because it's so important, especially if you're Ohio State, because it's so important to win. There's so many O-line coaches that are better than what Justin Fry is giving Ohio State. It's just so many. I am a Michigan fan. I'm the weird Michigan fan who roots for Ohio State much of the time. It would be easier for me to root for Ohio State if there was a different O-line coach because they'd be playing better football. And with how Georgia is down, Alabama just had a very rough year. The pressure is going to be on them. With how I think Ohio State is, I don't know. I mean, they beat Oregon, they crushed Oregon, they beat Texas. Those are the two other rising programs. Penn State, their window to be a rising program might still be there, but I think they have to get better at NIL, and I think they have to win a big game next year and probably play for a national championship, or at least reach the Final Four like they did this year, but either win the Big Ten or beat Ohio State or Oregon in the regular season. Something along those lines. Ohio State right now, if they're not the number one program, they're the number two program nationally. And I would say if they win it all, they're the number one program. Straight up with what they've done. They have now another reason why I want Fry fired is there's also the angle that this team is assisted in winning it all because they're a lot like Michigan's team last year. Not entirely. Michigan has more first-round NFL talent and a more balanced roster, and I think a better team than this Ohio State team. Also, they match up well with this Ohio State team, as I think Michigan this year and Texas and Penn State and Nebraska this year have shown the way to beat Ohio State or to play close and play to them has shown. But, like Michigan last year, Ohio State this year has a billion seniors and a lot of really good players, a lot of really good role players. And they have enough aliens to where, I mean, you're going to have to coach circles around them to even have a chance at really beating them, or your roster's just going to have to be that good. And there is a chance that once the seniors leave, that in part because of what Fry's done, but also some of the other vulnerabilities we've seen, that next year this team's a lot worse. I don't think that'll happen, but I also didn't think that Michigan would get a lot worse after all they lost. Now, Ohio State recruits better. They're not going through a major coaching change. They've recruited better at QB specifically, so I'm not even saying that's comparable. I'm not. But Ohio State fans would be very mad with 9-3 next year. They'd be mad with 10-2 next year. 10-2 at Ohio State is kind of a failure unless now you go on and win it all. Then it's a success because the Natty means that much. Justin Fry leaving Ohio State and being replaced with an upgrade would do so much to raise Ohio State's floor, and I think even more to raise their ceiling. Because if you give Will Howard all day, he'll find receivers because their receivers are just that good. So, pardon me if you think that's outlandish. I'll make a brief video on it. The Justin Fry hate is not hate. It's facts. This team ran for not even 4 yards per carry and 81 total yards. And if not for the best running back duo in the country, since maybe Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, they probably run for like 1.5 yards per carry. If not for that running back room, they probably lose because Henderson doesn't turn that screenplay into a 75-yard touchdown. That's all I'm trying to say. It's not a criticism of Ryan Day or of this team. It's a criticism of one man who holds the team back. And that's all I want to say on that. I think I've spoken too much on it for the fact that I do want to get this video done. Let me see. Wow, I think you put this pretty perfectly. Although I don't know if I agree with it. I feel like I'll be more optimistic than you will, the money 5675. If OSU wins the championship next week, they'll probably have a down year like Michigan did. Even if you fire Fry, it'll take at least a year to get his philosophy out of the program. It's so hard, especially since the best programs almost all lose people at the top. But then again, the best programs right now, I think, have the best coaches outside of a few teams like Michigan State, who I think is a really good coaching staff. I think that, I don't know. Like, Ohio State could win it all next year. If they upgrade their O-line coach, I might pick them to win it all next year. And I even was thinking that when I thought they would lose to Oregon, that I might pick this team to win it all in 2025, anticipating staff upgrades, because this team really is that good roster-wise, year over year over year. With OSU, with maybe the exception of the O-line now, just because how poorly Fry's recruited, it's never a question about talent. It's almost always coaching and game day decision-making. But thank you, Demoney5675, for that conversation. Said kind of like the 2021 season without CJ Stroud. Yeah, Mateo A. I said on Twitter before the game kicked off that if I could redo my prediction based off of basically vibes, I would pick Texas. But that was kind of more of a what-if thing than necessarily a statement of confidence, because I also said in like the same tweet that I have no clue who's going to win this game. It was just a feeling more so than anything. SFS Inverted with the $10 super chat. Thank you again. Is the season considered a failure if we lose the Natty? And he also says next year will be a down year, but we shouldn't have a Michigan type season. No. Next year, worst case scenario is 9-3, especially with the easier schedule, and it's probably more likely to be 10-2, given that Ryan Day has a Michigan problem, not a top 10 team problem, and there's only one Michigan on the schedule, not 3, not 4, not 5. Texas is at home. Penn State's at home. You have better coaching than they do. You have a better head coach than they do. Much better play caller in head coach or game manager than they do. And you have the better roster. And you're at home. I mean, this truly was the year for Penn State to catch Ohio State. Now, if Franklin beats them next year and you're a Penn State fan, it's totally worth it, because you kind of... to lose to Franklin at home is kind of a sign of humiliation if you're Michigan or if you're... Ohio State, but I won't predict that next year. I do think the season's a failure if you lose to Notre Dame. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. It almost feels disingenuous, but that's from me being an objective analyst and a guy who might be a little bit biased toward Day. As a person. Like, I think he's a really good individual, and I want him to be better than Urban Meyer. I do. Because I think that he's a better person than Urban Meyer. I think that he has a better culture than Urban Meyer in terms of, like, creating fit and, like, great young men. And I also think that this program right now is, like, in no way, shape, or form worse than where Urban left it off. So, like, for a variety of reasons, I actually am incentivized to want Day to succeed against everyone but the school that I attend, Michigan. I do think because of the loss to Michigan, because there's no Big Ten championship, I think that a title win's a must. I think they do have to win it all. I think... especially since Notre Dame is roster-wise the worst out of the semifinal teams. They're one-dimensional. They have issues. You should beat them. You straight up should beat them if you're Ohio State. Now, is the season a failure in the sense that... Let me turn off my TV here. They're not playing anything of significance anyway. Is the season a failure in the sense that, we got to burn the program down and fire everyone? Well, no, of course not. You won 3 playoff games. You beat 2 of the best programs, and I'd say the 2 most rising programs in the entire country. No, like, don't fire everyone. And if I think these 3 games have proven so far that Day will win a title, like, at OSU, no matter what, in my opinion. However, the season would be a failure in the sense that they didn't achieve the goals that they were boasting about and talking about all season long. Like Emeka Egbuka, Jack Sawyer, and all the seniors who came back basically said, the Michigan game, the team up north, which I think that moniker should be removed. I think that's part of the reason why Ohio State loses to Michigan, is they don't respect them. That's clear in the body language. It's clear in how they play against Michigan. But they came back because they wanted to beat Michigan. If they did, they probably would have all left, and they'd all be in the NFL right now. And this team looks wildly different. They came back because they wanted to beat Michigan, and they assumed, and they would be correct in this, because they beat Michigan, they would have went to the Big Ten championship and beaten Oregon. They assumed by beating Michigan, we'd play for the Big Ten, then we win the Big Ten, and by doing those things, we're in the running for a national title. They didn't achieve two of those goals. They were not the best team in the Big Ten in the regular season. That was Oregon. And if you want to weigh the losses heavy, then Penn State was even better than Ohio State was in the regular season. They're the best team in the Big Ten in the postseason, but that doesn't matter if they don't win at all. They'll be 0-3 in their goals, and the senior class's goals, they'll be 0-12. So I think the season is a failure. Says the answer is no, but I want your opinion. Donnie Heath disagrees and says yes, stay as 3 goals, beat Michigan, make the playoffs, win a natty. Yeah, I mean, someone said, if we beat Michigan next year, it's the money 5-6-7-5. If we beat Michigan next year like they did us, I wouldn't care what our record is. I just want to beat Moore with his stupid celebrations on the sidelines and him waving goodbye. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he in truth is a living meme. It's one of my favorite things about Sharon Moore. Him like shooting the arrow or waving to that made me wheeze my butt off. That was hilarious. It's like, seriously, Ryan Day, like, you lost to that team. It was the worst Michigan team non-COVID year since Brady Hoke. It often felt like Brady Hoke was on the sidelines, but that game matters. It will matter even if OSU wins it all, because Ohio. You can't place that much Ryan Day can't say a loss to Michigan affects him like in a similar way that him losing his dad did, and then then that can't be true, and also the fact that the loss to Michigan this year didn't matter. It matters and it stings no matter what. But at least you end the year as the best team in the country by achievement, even with the loss to Michigan, and that overall makes the season a success, even though it could have been better. So that's those are my thoughts. I think soon enough I'm going to segue into whatchamacallit. I'm going to segue into like my, more, how do I say this? More formal segment. I'm going to go over what I took with my notes. I'm going to go over, of course, like the stats and all that different stuff, but I think that'll be in a few minutes. I don't want to do that quite yet because the chat is so engaging. SFS Inverted, I think, is going to bed. Yeah, have a good night, everyone. That's what he says. Someone said, am I on mushrooms? Calling Michigan the team up north has nothing to do with it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't know. Every time it's said now by someone like Ohio State, it no longer carries what it did with Urban, where like they had the right to say that because Urban never lost to Michigan, and he owned Michigan, and he owned Jim Harbaugh, and he owned Brady Hoke. Back then, it had the feeling of like, yeah, like say it. Like you own the rivalry, and it was a way for Urban Meyer to motivate his team, and they respected Michigan. Now, whenever anyone says it with Ohio State in regards to Michigan, it sounds like Brady Hoke saying Ohio. It sounds clownishly disrespectful, not rivalry disrespectful, but clownishly disrespectful. Like the person saying it honestly believes, and I'm not saying this is with you Ohio State fans, because that's not what this is about. This is about the team. It's about the players. When the players say the team up north with Michigan, It feels like they honestly believe that Michigan should never be better than they are, which I don't really have a problem with that. I think, any team with a sense of pride that's a blue blood should feel that way with their rival. But more importantly, and this is where it matters, they feel like Michigan can never be better than them. Last year, when Denzel Burke made that comment about how there was nothing special about Michigan, hearing that comment kind of told me, yeah, this team's not beating Michigan even if they have like their best game, because they're approaching it with a little bit of the wrong attitude. And on top of that, Michigan last year had the better roster. In 2022, Ohio State kind of acted like they should have blown out Michigan. When they didn't, they melted down. This year, I think it was a bit of the same thing. Except instead of seeing it in the emotions of the players, you saw it in the play calling. Running all those inside zones against the best D-line in the nation. Way to respect your opponent. It's ridiculous. Let me see let me see what people are saying. Woody lost the 10-year war and was still quoted saying he wouldn't buy gas in the state of Michigan. I don't know. I feel like that was different, in my opinion. maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just not a traditionalist. I don't know. But I think with the 4-game losing streak and the way that specifically Ohio State players have talked about Michigan in kind of a casual way, it's just something has to change with how Ohio State approaches the rivalry. That's basically all I'm trying to say. Because if the approach doesn't change next year, Michigan will win again, because they are getting better. Michigan is, mainly because the QB upgrade, and Ohio State will get worse. And the games in Ann Arbor, where no Ohio State player, by the way, knows what it's like to win in Ann Arbor. Day does, but that was back in 2019 when Day didn't have a beard and shaved every day. So, there's that. Okay, is there any more super chats or anything anyone else wants to say? And if not, if there aren't any more questions or super chats, what I will do is I'll segue in to the to kind of like just the formal reaction and breakdown. And Woody didn't go for Woody went for 2 because he couldn't go for 3. That's how the mythical quote goes. In fact, I've heard that the quote was debunked and he never said that, but I still think I still like to imagine he said that. That's like a really, really good quote. I think of that quote whenever I go for 2 on my opponents, just because when like playing a college football video game, like I wish I could go for 3 and just like rub it in their face. Score 9 points instead of 8. All right, good night, King Kavosha. I just think we've done it for so long. The general consensus would that it would be soft to start calling them Michigan. Well, then I get that. If that's what it is, then the words don't have to change. After all, it's not the words that have to change; it's the mentality. The mentality, the way that Ohio State approaches the rivalry has to change. Maybe they're still approaching it the same way Urban did, and because Michigan approaches it differently now, that doesn't work. Or maybe Day changed the approach to Michigan, and that's not working. I don't know what it is. All I know is, as a Michigan fan, and having watched Ohio State basically poop their pants against Michigan for 3 out of the 4 losses, there needs to be a different approach. Like, there has to be. Like, all 3 of those games, outside of all 3 of those games, well, no. The 22 and 24 games were easily winnable. Those, in fact, could have been OSU blowouts had they gone the other way. I don't think Ohio State, in most universes, was beating Michigan in 21, especially. And I also don't think they were beating Michigan in most universes in 23. But that was due to, roster mismatches, and also 23 Michigan being like one of the only teams to go undefeated and win it all. Like, not one of the GOAT teams, but a team that certainly is like in the next tier below and pretty close to that tier. That was actually a game where I thought Ryan Day called a great game against Michigan. Just Michigan was the better team, so Michigan won. But, Good thing that was interesting. Let me see. I'm just imagining Uncle Lou laughing at us for 20 minutes straight if we stopped calling them the team up north. I wouldn't laugh at it. I'd kind of be like, I'd kind of be a little bit scared if Ohio State started calling Michigan, because that would represent. I'm not saying that's like the end all be all, but that would represent a mentality change if they started calling Michigan. Like, that would make me scared that either Ohio State doesn't want it to be a rival anymore, which I would hate that because I want it to be a rivalry forever, or they would tell me they're changing their approach and trying to win. And that would scare me too as a Michigan fan. But anyway, we're now talking about Ohio State, Michigan. I don't want to do that because Michigan's season is over. It's dead. Like, Michigan's sitting at home on the couch, hopefully thinking to themselves, like, if we just had a competent QB, a better staff, and like one wide receiver that like is good, we probably reach the playoff and win a playoff game. Tougher opponent, Kovadis. Thank you for the question. Oregon or Texas? Texas, for sure. Texas for one by power ratings. This is something that I foolishly ignored for much of the year. Texas is the better team overall, but more importantly, Oregon wants to do what Ohio State wants to do. They just don't nearly have the same defense, nor do they have the same offensive weapons. So Ohio State matches up with Oregon pretty well. I feel like that's actually something I identified in the first matchup. It's just Oregon ended up winning, and then I steered away from that fact, and I should never done that. Whatever, though. Texas matches up very well with Ohio State because Texas is not as good of a team as Ohio State is. The regular season numbers and statistics bear that out, but Texas matches up well with Ohio State. And if not for some questionable coaching decisions, they win. So definitely Texas is the better opponent. And Notre Dame probably matches up better with Ohio State than Oregon does, but with how Ohio State's playing now and with what Ohio State's roster is now. Sam, do you still hate Notre Dame for backing out of the rivalry with Michigan? Yes. Yes, I do. I can give a personal rooting interest because it doesn't affect my analysis. I mean, I still picked Ohio State to win this game, picked them to win it all on several shows. My personal rooting interest in this game's undecided because I don't want Notre Dame to win the Natty because I feel like a team that loses to NIU should just rot because it's cancerous and they're one-dimensional. And then for Ohio State, I don't want them to win it all because I don't want Justin Fry to be back. I mean, he's so annoying. No man for Ohio State football has gotten more credit than he deserves than Justin Fry. No man. Not even Kerry Combs before he was fired and before everyone figured out that he wasn't all that good. I do not like Notre Dame for backing out of that rivalry. It's disgusting. Michigan would have worked that team in 21, in 22, in 23. Would have beaten all three of those teams. And instead, what happens? Didn't play them. And Notre Dame would have worked Michigan this year. There's no question about that. Or maybe it would have been close to the fact that, Notre Dame was a bit one-dimensional, but I'd still pick them to win. It's just, why do you back out of that? I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's a traditional rivalry. It's one of the best rivalries in college football. They just backed out of it. Terrible. Disgusting, to be frank. Oh, wow. Oh, we got a $10 super chat. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, we're getting paid tonight, guys. We are getting paid. And that's incredible. Thank you guys, by the way, because that's all from you. All of that super chat stuff, all of what I earn on YouTube, which typically goes right to my bank to pay college tuition, that's all because of you guys. So I appreciate that. Kovadis, thanks for your reviews this year. Solid information. Well, I hope to see you around in the preseason because tomorrow we're also going to be giving my top 10 teams for next year. way, 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 way too early. That list might change like right after the national championship game, and depending on more portal info. So there will be that. I hope to see you in the regular season as well for 2025. Thank you again for that $10 super chat. Who? Notre Dame didn't back out of the rivalry. The ACC conference didn't allow it by contract. Well, Michael, if you're correct on that, then my animosity towards Notre Dame goes exponentially down. I mean, I don't even really have animosity for Notre Dame because I like Marcus Freeman, and I think it'd be cool if like he succeeded there. Well, the ACC is the All Charmin Conference, so screw them. They're practically useless without one of the good teams they produce every year. Let me see. Y'all salty OSU and the Natty, I get it. It's not that we are good, it's just that everyone else sucked. Hey, you know, there's this guy on Twitter who says that about Michigan. That's the only... Oh, crap. Josh Pate just released a reaction before I did. Well, he gets more views than I do anyway. I shouldn't complain. I'm hoping... My goal, because he's the biggest college football channel on YouTube, my goal is to one day get bigger than him. That'd be quite the incredible feat. I don't really compare my channel to his other than when I think it can benefit my channel because he is one of the best in the business, and I do like to learn from him. I'd love to have him on the show one day, which I'll try and get him on in like the preseason. Maybe he'll like me. Maybe he won't. But yeah, I think that that's I empathize with that. That's what people said about Michigan last year. Oh, they only won it all because the field sucked. Or like they said that about who'd they say? People say that about Alabama in 2020. Oh, it was the COVID year, so nothing matters. It's just stop it. Like when I say that I think Michigan last year beats OSU this year, it isn't for me to pound my chest and say, oh, that means Michigan's better. No, it's just from what I think is the objective point of view. I think 2021 Georgia probably beats 2023 Michigan. Like, probably. Or maybe not. But 2019 LSU certainly beats 2023 Michigan. So does 2020 Bama. And I think that Michigan beats 2022 Georgia. I think this year's Ohio State. Well, because of how dependent this team is on the O-line because of Howard and how they want like so many long plays to develop. I don't know about that. But like this Ohio State team with a healthy O-line probably beats 2022 Georgia. So when I make opinions, I'm not like Paul Feinbaum where I think that like one conference is supreme. That's not how this works. I try and be as objective as possible. I tried to fight it, but I can't do it alone. Who said, like, what do you mean? To Money 5675. What do you mean by that? Thank you guys for the likes, for the chat, for all the engagement. This is fun. I'm going to keep doing this until I might even do this until 1:30. We might close out with the Ohio State 28, Texas 14 win. This was incredible. Seriously, like absolutely incredible. Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I just here's what I think. In sum, at the end of the day, Ohio State just made fewer critical errors, and they had the better athletes. And because the trenches, while Texas won the trenches, because Ohio State had a mobile quarterback to compensate for that a bit, and also because Ohio State did a better job at forcing coverage sacks than Texas did. The trenches at the end of the day were not going to overwhelmingly decide the game. And instead, because Ohio State got 2 plays, one defensive and one offensive that were longer than 70 yards and both were touchdowns, that won them the game right there. So those are my thoughts at the end of the day. THS last, 2019 LSU doesn't beat 2023 Michigan. Oh, I'm sure they do. Now, 2019 LSU, for being a GOAT caliber team, is not as good as some make them out to be, but they're still a GOAT caliber team. That team beats 2023 Michigan. I'll tell you that right now. 2019 LSU gets more and more overrated every passing year. They're not as good as 2001 Miami. 2020 Alabama was a lot better than 2019 LSU. In fact, by power ratings, 2019 Ohio State beats 2019 LSU, though they never played, so we'll never know the result for that. I do think that 2019 LSU is in part inflated by the fact that in the 2010s, especially the late 2010s, the mid-late 2010s, the meta of the game was to run as many plays as possible, and that roster especially would benefit from that type of college football. But I still think they're pretty good. DeMoney 5675. Does 2019 OSU beat 2023 Michigan? My answer to that would be yes. Yeah. 2019 Ohio State was the greatest team of all time that didn't win a national title, at least in the 21st century, outside of maybe that one USC team, I think 05 USC, that lost to Texas in the national title. 2019 Buckeyes were one of the best teams of all time that never won at all, that never even play. If you want to go a step further and say a team that didn't even play in the national championship game, I think 2019 Ohio State's the greatest team of all time that never played for a title, like that never played in a national championship game. So yeah, I mean, I do think that team beats 2023 Michigan. I do. Paulie Walnuts, I want to know where the SEC is right now. It's a pretty good meme. Let me see. Oh, yeah, wait, does that mean Indiana's guaranteed the third rank in the final rankings as they lost to OSU and Notre Dame? I do think that in hindsight, the Indiana and Notre Dame games look better on... Cignetti's a damn good coach. I don't think Indiana is going to take as far a step of a back next year as people think. Was this year in part a one-off because of the easy schedule? Yeah, but Indiana's probably, in terms of like talent and being in year 2 of the system, they actually might be upgrading like overall next year. Record-wise and stats-wise, that may not reflect, but in terms of like potential, they might actually have more potential this year, next year than this year. Doubtful they'll go 11-1 again, or at least like that. But yes, Indiana lost to the 2 national championship game participants, Ohio State and Notre Dame. And if they don't go to that silent count against Ohio State, they probably still lose, but I wonder if they play him closer. For a while, I hated Clemson more than I hated Michigan. That's pretty insane coming from an OSU fan, but I get it. I mean, I'm not a Dabo Swinney fan. Won't stop me from ranking them inside my top 10 because I think they'll be pretty good this coming season. But yeah, Dabo Swinney is a cringe monster. I want to know where Lane Kiffin is right now. Lane, you know what Lane Kiffin can do? Lane Kiffin can buy another $50 million roster and lose 3 games. He's like James Franklin if Lane Kiffin traded 2 easy wins for 2 easy losses in exchange for a big win. Lane Kiffin is James Franklin if James Franklin sold his soul in exchange for getting to pound his chest and say that every other year he gets a good win, but in exchange he will never reach the college football playoff. That's Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin is James Franklin if he sold his soul. Indiana with some serious recruiting will be dangerous. That is the one concern with IU. The recruiting class this season wasn't good, but they brought in bodies, and I wonder if they sustain some success, if they'll get better recruits. OSU is currently tied for single-season AP top 5 wins with 2019 LSU, 1967 USC, and 1943 Notre Dame. So if they win the Natty, they also break this record. Yes, it's impressive, but like a comment below says, Ohio State has several more opportunities to play top 5 teams than past teams did because there's just more games to play. So people who tout that stat and say this is proof this Ohio State team is better than their record shows, I think are a little bit disingenuous, but you're not saying that. You're just pointing out a statistical fact, which is impressive. I mean, if they get 5 top 5 wins, it's pretty good. I mean, Penn State's a top 5 team this year. Texas is. That's 2. Notre Dame is. Oregon's probably, yeah, Oregon's there too. Ohio State. Those are the... Ohio State's beaten 4 top 5 teams. IU, at the time, was rated top 5. In power ratings, I'd say they're top 10, or at least top 15. It's an impressive resume, for sure. Shane Beamer crashed out trying to fight people, someone says. Well, Shane Beamer would be lucky to ever have what Ohio State has this year. The odds say that he will never have that, in fact, because he's Shane Beamer. And when you lose to Brett Bielema, it's kind of a wart on you. You know, speaking of losing to Brett Bielema, you know that James Franklin has lost to Brett Bielema, Scott Frost, Mark D'Antonio, when Mark D'Antonio wasn't all that good anymore. He had a losing record against Jim Harbaugh, even losing to some pretty overrated Jim Harbaugh teams. Never beat Ryan Day. He's lost to Kirk Ferentz, but then again, that's not really dishonorable at all. Who hasn't lost to Kirk Ferentz outside of the best teams? Who else has he lost to? Who else is James Franklin lost to? Oh, yeah, he lost to Lane Kiffin, which is... what? Take that away from what you will. Sam, I wanted to know your opinion on Colorado. I know it's random. Will Deion go to the NFL after the end of next year? I think he's at Colorado to stay. I mean, they have the best... Colorado, with the exception of maybe Texas Tech, because Texas Tech now is a billionaire bankrolling them, I think that Colorado's just going to have the best NFL talent profile of the Big 12 in terms of especially skill position players for probably a long time. So why would he leave? Why? Someone asked, does Penn State move on from Franklin? No. He did just enough this year to stop me from advocating for him to be fired. Now, if next year it's the exact same season, then I will advocate for them kicking him to the curb. But they didn't lose to any trash opponent. They just lost to all the good teams, which is what Franklin has done every single year except for 2016. And that season was... They compensated for beating Ohio State by losing to Pitt early in the year and getting destroyed by Michigan and Ann Arbor. Alrighty. I think we're getting pretty close to, a point where most of you want to go to bed, where I will want to go to bed, and also to the point where I want to record this and get it out to tomorrow. And what did the conference champions do in the playoffs? They didn't do anything. Oh, there's an argument going on. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start talking about this game from a statistical standpoint mostly. This is going to be the 20-minute segment that I release tomorrow. That way, people don't have to pour through an hour of me ranting. It'll be easier for those who are already in bed or who are new to the channel to find this. But also, this won't be deleted like last night's stream was, because last night's stream was bad. This one's been pretty good. I've been higher in energy. I'm not as exhausted, not as burned out. I mean, today was a pretty good day. Penn State is the best team in the history of college football, if being the best is just treading water. Right? You know what's crazy, too? You give Penn State over the previous 3 years a better staff, they might field a 2023 Michigan caliber team or a caliber of the Georgia teams. I might make a video on that just because, think about it. Chop Robinson, Abdul Carter, their D tackles this year are good. Think about their linebackers. Think about the DBs, especially safeties they've produced. Think about, Hunter Norzad, Olu Fashanu, some of the offensive linemen they've produced this year. Think about Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson, the tight ends they've had. Think about Parker Washington. Think about Harrison Wallace. Think about Keandre Lambert-Smith, who's good, just not great. And think about Drew Aller. And also think about Sean Clifford and how he's had some good games. An elite staff, some of Ohio State staffs under Day, some of Michigan staffs under Harbaugh, like 21-23, or the Kirby Smart staff from 21, 22, maybe a bit of 23 as well. They probably win it all with that Penn State roster. Like, it was I'm not exaggerating when I say that, which is why I picked them in so many games. Like, the roster is really, 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 really good. And I didn't even say really enough times. Okay, people are, of course, still arguing, so we're just going to get on with it. And then if you guys have any super chats, because just because it's so late, the only questions I'll be answering from here on out likely will be super chats. So if you have any more, send them in, and I'll get to them after I do this quick segment talking about the game. Let me just make sure I'm all ready. Oh, that was a really good net crack. You know, that net crack right there was the epitome of what Jack Sawyer was doing on that 4th and goal. Just like, okay, I got this. Let me just wreck a top tier. Let me wreck a top tier tackle and just blow up Texas's hopes right in their face. Jack Sawyer's a legend, both for the interception in the Michigan game, for all the sacks he's earned in the college football playoff. That man is a trooper, and that man deserved more in the Michigan game and in terms of winning the Big Ten and even in terms of winning national championships than he has had in his career. However, he's going to have success in the NFL, and at least Ohio State seems to be getting it right now for a variety of factors, but they've been controlling the controllables for a long time under Ryan Day. It's just now it feels like it's their turn. You need a little bit of luck in many instances to win the college football playoff. You just do. Even some of the best teams of all time, like 2001 Miami, had a pick six against Boston College that won them the game. Similar to this game right here, although Boston College is much worse than this Texas team. It was their only bad game of the year. Needed a little bit of luck to ensure that they could get to where they got, and I think they're one of the best, if not the best team of all time in college football. So, there's that. The Ohio State Buckeyes escape or survive, or maybe you just want to say beat the Texas Longhorns. I think any of those descriptions are accurate, but I don't think if you are an Ohio State fan, you are frustrated whatsoever. If you're a Texas fan, you're extremely frustrated for those reasons. You had it. You had the ball. The ball was in your court, and you simply kicked it back to Ohio State's court. You dropped the wide open pass. Ohio State won 28-14 in a wonderful back and forth Cotton Bowl classic. And now Ohio State advances to the national championship game to play the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Texas goes home. So we're going to be talking about this Cotton Bowl Classic matchup where Ohio State did not trail for the entirety of the game, but it was very close. Texas had multiple points where they could have won, but whether it was due to Ohio State's coaching, Texas coaching, a variety of X-factor players on both sides of the ball stepping up or failing to step up, Ohio State won this game, and they were the better team. So let's roll. Let's get right in it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit the notification bell. I know that many of you probably watch my show consistently, but you just haven't subscribed because you haven't thought about it. I've done that with some channels that I've watched. I think even at one point with like a big name like Josh Pate or Joel Klatt, I was watching them like, oh, I'm not subscribed to them. Let me subscribe to them. So it's just something that happens even to the best of us. Please hit that like button. Click the subscribe button, click the notification bell as well so that you get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We will also be live Saturday, January 11th, so tomorrow at the time of this recording, and today at the time you will be watching this, most of you at least, at 6 p.m. Eastern Time to preview the national championship game and do a little bit more deep analysis of some of these playoff games. You won't want to miss that. So the notification bell so that you can get notified when we release new content. If you want to support the channel, you can send a super thanks in the comment section below. You can sign up as a paid member of the Patreon page to donate monthly. That is the method I would encourage if you're going to send me money, but do it however you would like. I appreciate all the support. Or you can purchase merchandise via my merchandise store. The links to the Patreon page and the merchandise store are in the description and pinned comment. Also, last but not least, join our Discord server via the links in the description or down below in the pinned comment. We talk college football 24/7. We'd love to have more Texas and Ohio State fans, more fans from all college football backgrounds on that Discord server. But let's get into this matchup right here. This Cotton Bowl Classic. Specifically, this is a mouthful, kind of something I hate about the current playoff system. The college football playoff semifinal at the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic sounds like something that some animated voice would say on TV. That combined with the ads almost pushes me over the edge, because that's a lot of complex wording for something that isn't just complex. Just call it the CFP Cotton Bowl or the college football playoff semifinal at the Cotton Bowl. Like, we don't need Goodyear in there. And the game of football is a lot more complex than the Cotton Bowl name, and I know I'm probably like hyper fixating on something that's pretty useless here, but trust me, it goes somewhere. The game of football is a lot more complex than the name of a game. Seriously. And yet, it is more easily summarized and more appropriately summarized for whatever reason. I don't know why. Again, just call it the Cotton Bowl. Call it the Orange Bowl. It's what we refer to it as college football diehards. In summary, this game was very complex, as I already mentioned, but to summarize, because it's important, Ohio State outcoached Texas. That was the game right there. Was Ryan Day when it mattered, Chip Kelly when it mattered, Jim Knowles when it mattered. Outcoaching Steve Sarkisian, outcoaching Kyle Flood, and I know Steve Sarkisian's basically the de facto OC, but Kyle Flood is named that as well. And then also outcoaching Pete Kwiatkowski and Johnny Nansen. And there are several plays that are the epitome of this. Number one, OC to OC. Play caller to play caller on the offensive side of the ball. Chip Kelly has not ran Will Howard all day. Will Howard's run-blocking offensive line sucks without help. Do not get angry at me by saying that. If Ohio State had a good O-line and not one that was objectively terrible at times, they probably blow everyone out this year. They go 16-0, and they're viewed as good, if not better, than some of the three national championship teams that preceded them, outside of, 2020 Alabama, who would be that fourth team, and I think is one of the greatest teams of all time. Don't think Ohio State's that caliber, but no one's really of that caliber anyway, so it's useless to say that. And Texas certainly wasn't either. No one is 2020 Alabama this year, so it doesn't really matter to bring them up, other than to make the point that Ohio State could be better, if not for some things on the O-line. But what Kelly does is he calls a beautiful blocking scheme, and he runs Will Howard. And in part because he runs Will Howard, it makes it easier on the O-line, because Texas was not expecting a Will Howard quarterback-designed run. He picks up the 4th and 2. That helps Ohio State to make it 21-14 after Texas recaptured some of the momentum, finishes off a long drive beautifully, and at the end of the day, that leads to Ohio State winning. Fast forward a bit. About 3 minutes, maybe a little bit more in the fourth quarter. It's 1st and goal at the 1 of Ohio State. Texas has the football. They run it up the middle. It's stuffed. But you've been running up the middle on them all right the entire game, especially in the second half. Not very consistently, but enough to where you should expect to pick up a yard. Why don't you do it again? Or maybe bring in Arch Manning, or maybe you throw from the 1 and make it a quick throw so that you don't get sacked and it's just incomplete, 3rd and goal. Nah, how about this? Steve Sarkisian with his headset on and like his little play calling card right in front of his face. Like this, for example, like this. Guys, how about we do a pitch to the left side where Ohio State has more defensive players than we have blockers, and it's against one of the best defenses in the country that tackles very well and is fundamentally sound. Loss of 7 yards. And I called it live. That was the game right there. That straight up. That was the game. Now, let's go to the defensive side. Jim Knowles' secondary got a little bit beat up in this game. from all the PIs and holding calls to whether it was Jaden Blue or whether it was Matthew Golden or Gunnar Helm or DeAndre Moore Jr. or Isaiah Bond, or if he doesn't drop the ball, maybe the outcome of the game is different because the drive's extended. Ohio State's DBs had some issues covering these wide receivers. They just did, and the running backs and the tight ends. But he never, ever allowed a 75-yard touchdown on a screen pass because his defense is too disciplined and because he didn't get greedy with the play call. That's really it right there. Also, Jim Knowles called plays that stopped 2 fourth downs, 2 of them. Meanwhile, the only 4th down Ohio State goes for all game, they convert with a long run that could have been a touchdown if Will Howard keeps his balance. The offensive play calling was better for Ohio State. The defensive play calling was better for Ohio State. The game management overall was mostly better for Ohio State. Texas looked like the better team in the middle 40 of the game. Late first quarter to early fourth quarter, they were the better team. They were clearly better for almost the entire game outside of the first 10 minutes of the first quarter in the trenches. But that's roster. And it wasn't sizable enough to compensate for the coaching edge that Ohio State had. For everyone that hates on Ryan Day, for everyone who doesn't like him, and even I, this year, for the first time in I think Ryan Day's career, questioned him because the loss to Michigan was that bad. But I never said that he, should be fired, at least from my personal opinion. I said I empathized with the opinion that he should have been after the Michigan game, thought that almost from an emotional sense it made sense, but thought logically it didn't. Or symbolically it made sense because being 0-4 against Michigan since your first win is not acceptable at OSU. But he wins the big games in large part, and the big games he doesn't win are against some of the greatest teams of all time or teams that win the national championship. It's hard to beat national championship contenders. It's hard to beat GOAT caliber teams. Just a fact of life, really. And then, on top of that, Ryan Day, when he was the play caller at OSU, called things brilliantly against most top 10 teams, even top 5 teams. Remember Clemson in 2020, Georgia in 2022. Remember Oregon this year, Tennessee this year, Texas just last night. And then there are probably other games I'm forgetting as well, like Michigan 2019, for example, is a game I'm probably forgetting. Or maybe in 2021 against Michigan State, where yes, Ohio State had matchup edges, but to be up 49-0 on a team that went 11-2 and who had some NFL players on, defense and had Kenneth Walker, that's pretty impressive. It's a pretty good game. Day is an elite college football head coach. And for those of you who thought that he was bad, you're wrong. For those of you who thought he was average, you're wrong too. Above average, wrong. Good, wrong. Great. I think now you're getting to a point where that's defensible. Near elite, that's very defensible, if not dead on. Elite, similar to near elite. I think Ryan Day, worst case scenario, is a near elite head coach. Best case scenario, he might be the best head coach in college football right now. This game's why. He's a better head coach than Steve Sarkisian, and he has, on an average basis, better coordinators, better play callers. That's why. It's straight up why. You look at, the final score, 28-14. Ohio State outgained Texas in yards, 370 to 341. They won the turnover battle, 1 turnover to Texas' 2. 18 first downs to Texas' 20. They led in TOP, 31 minutes, 38 seconds to Texas' 28-22. 9 penalties for 75 yards, but Texas had 5 for 54, so it's not like penalties were drastically different. Ohio State ran for 3.4 yards per carry. Texas ran for 2. 81 rushing yards for the Buckeyes, 58 for the Longhorns. Ohio State averaged 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Texas averaged 7.3. Both had 1 interception thrown. Howard had 1 touchdown pass. Ewers had 2 touchdown passes. Ohio State was 3 of 10 on third down, 1 of 1 on fourth down. Texas was 5 of 15 on third down, so exact same third down efficiency. Ohio State just had fewer third downs, but the Longhorns were 1 of 3 on fourth down. This is a game where you can look at the box score and actually kind of see what happened. Not in its entirety. The picture's very incomplete, but the box score actually does a fairly good job at parsing out how the game went along. It was a very close affair where at the end of the day, the better team won. The team that had the better fourth down conversion percentage, the more rushing yards, the more passing yards, more yards per carry, more yards per pass attempt, fewer turnovers, more TOP. And yeah, like there were several areas where Ohio State was just better than Texas. The team with a defensive score, too. While Texas's 2 turnovers, they weren't defensive scores. One of them led to a score. The other led to a punt. So the better team won. The better team won on Friday night in the Cotton Bowl Classic. And this was a Cotton Bowl Classic. This wasn't just any old Cotton Bowl. Because not every Cotton Bowl Classic is a college football classic game. This game was as good as the Orange Bowl. And I think that some lessons to be learned for both of these teams moving forward is that I think Texas needs better quarterback play. Ewers finished with a 69.5 QBR. I thought that he played an above average to good game. Not quite as good as Will Howard, mainly because of accuracy. But I think Howard's mobility helps with that a lot. I think if you gave Ewers Howard's mobility and Howard Ewers mobility, Texas probably wins. They might even win by 10 points in this game. Like that stuff matters, especially when both defensive lines were winning against both offensive lines the way they were in the trenches. I think that Quinn Ewers probably played his last game at Texas. I think that if Arch Manning had Ewers' passing ability with his legs, Texas probably wins. Like that game was really, really that close. It was. You change a few things, Texas wins. And if Texas won this game, I'd be saying the same thing. You change a few things, the Buckeyes win. And the Buckeyes came out on top for reasons that I think are very good. There are some games where a team comes out on top and you feel kind of icky about them, like yuck, like that's so gross. And they're very lucky they didn't bite them in the butt. That's not how you feel with Ohio State winning this close game. What you feel with them winning this close game is we only have one more game left. Nothing else matters. And we're thankful that we won this game and get a chance to play for a national championship where Ohio State's favored by 10 or 9.5 points, depending on where you look. Ohio State here was better at quarterback than Texas was. And that shouldn't be the case because Will Howard was a 3-star out of high school, and he has a really good supporting cast, but it's not like he has a Joe Moore Award O-line protecting him either. And he outplayed a 5-star QB in Quinn Ewers with more NFL talent on the O-line and also still really, really good receivers, fast running backs, and a great tight end. It's time for Texas, I think, to upgrade at QB. I also think Texas should look themselves a bit in the mirror, specifically Steve Sarkisian, and work on his game management skills because it's cost him 2 times against Georgia, cost him against Ryan Day. You know what the common theme between Kirby Smart and Ryan Day are? The common theme between them is they are good game managers. Sarkisian is not a good game manager. It's been one of his weaknesses with Texas. Recruiting is elite. NFL development is elite. Making sure the roster is balanced is elite. Beating the small teams, the medium teams, some good teams, and occasionally putting together such a wonderful offensive game plan that you still win a big game. Sark's great at all of those things. But at consistently beating the best of the best and playing to your team's potential, he is not elite at that. He's worse than Ryan Day at that. And it is very hard to win a national championship. That's not why I'm saying that about Sarkisian. I'm saying that because there is a universe where right now Texas is 15-0 and they're playing for an undefeated season. And they don't actually have the same roster limitations that OSU does. They didn't suffer season-ending injuries to their 2 best offensive linemen, and they don't have a spot on their roster where they have the same bad recruiting that OSU does. So Sark, there's a certain argument that he actually has a maybe better deck of cards than Day does this year. Now, that's just an opinion of mine that I'm not attaching myself to because it's more of a thought than a statement of fact from my perspective, but it's something to ponder. So that's the perspective with Texas. The defense for Texas played well. 2 sacks, 4 TFLs. Ohio State had 9 TFLs, 4 sacks. I thought that in this game, looking at it, I kind of thought to myself that Texas's defense played better than OSU's did. They didn't have the same breakdowns in general coverage. Now, they did have that 75-yard screen pass, but that was like basically it, and that was one play. On a play-per-play basis, holding all plays equal, which is, I think, faulty for determining a game winner, but not necessarily for determining, how good a position group is. On a play-per-play basis, I was more impressed with Texas's defense than I was with OSU's. And Jim Knowles is a damn good DC. He might be the best DC in college football. He's certainly a top 2 DC. The only other defensive coordinator I put in the same realm as Jim Knowles right now is Phil Parker at Iowa. That's it. And Knowles has done a better individual job this one season than Parker has, potentially for a variety of reasons, but there's a strong argument that Jim Knowles is the number 1 DC in the country. So Pete Kwiatkowski and Johnny Nansen have earned massive respect for me after this game. But it was also clear, to circle back to Texas, that with all the offensive weapons they have, and even with the better offensive line than Ohio State, especially in terms of potential and NFL talent, Ohio State's offense was that much better. It really, really was that much better. They put together more sustainable drives. They put together several long drives, longer drives than what Texas had for scores. They scored more offensive points, and it felt like at times Ohio State wasn't out-scheming Texas for offensive play calling. In the biggest moments they did, which is why I give Ohio State the coaching edge in totality for this game, but Sarkisian was doing wonderful play calls throughout the game, getting guys open, using motion, finding creative ways to run the ball. And I don't think Ohio State did that for a lot of the game, really until they had to in the fourth quarter. And yet Ohio State's offense was clearly the better offense in every position outside of tight end and the offensive line. And that needs to be fixed. Whatever is wrong with Texas's offense, and it's been this way every year under Sark, where they just have never really cracked that top 10 level, something needs to give there. And I'm thinking it's QB play, but I also think play calling has something to do with it as well. And that's the Texas side of things. Look, they went 13-3. I don't think for Texas the season is a failure. I don't think it's a resounding success either, but they also finished first in the SEC, and that was their first year. Regular season, I know, was a pretty easy schedule, but they finished first, and they were the best team in the SEC analytically. So I think that for year one in a new conference, the season overall was a success. Not a resounding success, not as successful as Oregon's first year in the Big Ten, for example, because they were undefeated, beat either the national runner-up or the national champion in the regular season. They also won the conference, which, again, Texas didn't do. But still, 13-3 for year 4 under Sark, I think, is a success. They're recruiting at a high level, developing at a high level. I wouldn't be shocked next season if Texas might be, dare I say it, better than they are this year. That wouldn't shock me at all, especially with like Anthony Hill Jr. and Colin Simmons returning. Really, really good players. I mean, they have so much depth, and they have a lot of guys who are impact players. Colin Simmons, for example, is like an alien, and he's coming back. So Texas is a bright future. Wouldn't be shocked if they actually beat Ohio State and Columbus to kick off the 2025 regular season. Speaking of Ohio State, let's turn to the Buckeyes. For the Buckeyes, it's simple. You can win it all, and you're in the national championship game, and that's wonderful, and you're a massive, massive favorite, and you have a great head coach, an elite head coach. You have an elite defensive coordinator. You have an elite offensive coordinator who I think pairs well with Ryan Day. I think that Ryan Day, quite honestly, is a better OC than Kelly is. But the fact that you basically have 2 OCs on the team and they can mesh philosophies, that just kind of compounds on top of the greatness of the cerebralness, I don't even know if that's a word, of Ryan Day's philosophy on offense, which is very, very effective. You outpassed Texas, you outran Texas, you on defense you're in more sacks, you're in more TFLs, you had more passes defended, and you got a defensive touchdown, and you made bigger plays. You had a really, really good game. Now, was it perfect? No, of course not. 9 penalties for 75 yards. Your O-line, I don't want to hear anyone praise Justin Fry for the rest of the year. I don't. I just don't. Don't want to, because if you had a better O-line coach than Justin Fry and a better recruiter, this game's never in doubt. There's no need for panic attacks. In fact, it'd be that way for the whole year. You would have never, ever, outside of maybe the Penn State game, because the O-line played well there, outside of maybe the Penn State game, you would have never had a, oh, I pooped my pants moment for the whole season. Never would have. And for the Penn State game, it would have only been for a quarter, like it was in reality. And maybe that's even pushing it, because Ohio State with a better O-line probably wins that game by double digits too. This is a really good team. It's a team with limitations, though. And it's what I said in my preview and prediction video. It's what I've said in my guest interviews. Like, Texas is going to limit this team. And that Ohio State's ceiling in this game is going to be lower than in other matchups, because they have a loss in the trenches in this game. And they did. They did. Some of the numbers like sacks and TFLs may not bear that out for you, but watch the game. Seriously, watch the game and tell me who won in the trenches. It was Texas. Not by a wide margin, which is a big part of the reason Ohio State won. They were within the margin of error in the trenches for much of the game, and because they made the big plays and they made the right play calls and Texas didn't, they won. But I said that Texas would limit this team because this team's ceiling is not as high as many people think it is. But that doesn't matter. That only matters for the fact that Ohio State's not invincible. And that doesn't matter if Ohio State plays well, if they outcoach their opponents. Basically what I'm trying to say is this team is not invincible. And yet at the same time, that shouldn't matter because they have some of the best coaches and most talented players in the country. So therefore, you should expect to win the games. It's just, you shouldn't expect to win in blowouts all the time, because that's not what this team is. And tonight showed that in the Cotton Bowl. But they were better on fourth down. They were the same as Texas on third down. They had more total yards, more sustainable drives. Henderson's one of my favorite players. Might be one of my favorite players of all time after this game. He throws a punch, makes a terrible mistake, probably risked getting kicked out of the game, maybe should have gotten kicked out of the game, and then he comes back. He averages 7 yards per carry on the ground with a long of 22, and he has 75 receiving yards for 1 receiving touchdown on a screen pass. If that play doesn't happen, Texas is playing Notre Dame in the national championship, based off of how that second half went. Wonderful player, elite player. And kudos to Quinshon Judkins, too. Averaged 4 yards per carry, had 2 touchdowns, ran hard. And also, I want to shout out one more player for Ohio State, that being Carnell Tate. 7 receptions for 87 yards. Jeremiah Smith had 1 reception for 3 yards. They bracketed him. Texas has the defense to do what Penn State and Michigan did, where they have good enough players at every position, and they're very physical, NFL-esque at the D-line, to where they're going to make Howard uncomfortable. And Howard's not going to be able to play his best game. So therefore, other players have to step up, and Ohio State's defense has to step up. And what Ohio State did in this game was what they did against Penn State, in my opinion. You got the goal line stop in a different way, but you got it. The game was very close. It was a 4-quarter affair, but at the end of the game, you knew who the better team was, and the losing team had the inferior coach, even though they may have had the roster that should have won the game. It's so confusing. It's so confusing. I say that because I'm an admirer of Ohio State. I admire Ryan Day, but there is a lot of truth in the fact that you typically don't see teams succeed at this level with the offensive line that Ohio State has. And I hope that tonight showed some of you that thought I was ridiculous for saying that showed some of you like, hey, yeah, this guy who has long blonde hair and blue eyes and clearly has never played the sport in terms of physicality, or at least in terms of just how he talks about the game, knows something about the game. Ohio State's O-line's not good. Their play calling's good. Their QB is very good. Very good. Tonight he compensated for the O-line. I mean, that one throw where he's backpedaling and he gets it to Tate, that was all him. The O-line didn't do anything. The O-line almost let him get, killed. The O-line almost let him get him, almost let Howard receive a concussion by Bill Norton or Colin Simmons. He made that throw. You have a really good QB. You have the best receiver room in the nation. Just the point being, Day overall, really outside of that Michigan game, has done a wonderful job coaching this year. Really. If you put Day with Texas, or you put Day with Penn State, I genuinely believe those two teams may have beaten OSU based off of matchups. But they didn't. And Ohio State's 13-2. And there's only one of Ryan Day. And you have him. You have Ryan Day. No one else does. And the only other coach right now who's comparable to Ryan Day in terms of achievement, especially with recency bias, is Kirby Smart, who has 2 national championships. If you're an Ohio State fan, at the night of January 20th, you will probably, the odds say, be hoisting the national championship. So you have a really good coach. And the fact that your head coach is not your problem is something that you should be flexing your muscles about and, kissing your muscles all around and just annoying other fan bases about that. You don't have a potential head coaching issue like Penn State does in big games, like Texas might in big games, like Michigan might overall, like, let's say, just thinking here, like Alabama might overall, like USC does overall, like LSU has potentially, or like they had with Ed Orgeron, even though he won them a title, or like Miami has with Cristobal in big games, or just any game that matters in general, or what they had with Larry Coker when they won it all. You do not have that problem. You don't. Day will be at OSU probably until the day that, metaphorically speaking, his career dies. He will probably be at Ohio State. That's just my opinion. And I think that he is a really good head coach. He's elite. And you won because of him. Straight up. You won because of him. And because he was the best head coach on the field. And because in every game he has played in this year, since maybe Oregon the first time around, definitely Oregon the first time around, now that I refresh my memory, but in 14 out of 15 games this year, Day has been the better head coach on the sidelines. And in every game that has mattered the most, he's been the better head coach on the sidelines. Well, actually 13 of 15. I can't believe Sharon Moore outcoached him. I will never, that will never make sense to me in my head. But again, because of how the 12-team playoff works and it's not 4 teams, Ohio State got in. And credit to Day for taking advantage of the opportunity. They are 3-0. 3-0 in the 12-team playoff. Might be 4-0 after Monday, January 20th, close to midnight. Just absolutely incredible for Ohio State. This is real. This is real. Go out and win the national championship. Just do it. Go out and beat Notre Dame as you've beaten them in 2022 and 2023. Beat them for the 3rd year in a row. And that's it. I think that's all I had to say about that game right there. You see what some of you guys were saying in the comments. They did lose 2 All-Americans with season-ending injuries. Not too many teams would be able to withstand that. Oh, Dion McKissick. What did you say? Jeremiah Smith got hurt earlier in the game and wasn't moving the same after. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, thank you for letting me know. That's unfortunate for him. I hope that he's okay. Yeah. Let me see. Matt Norshey, I love how Michigan fans thought our season was over when we lost to them. I know they are hating what we are doing right now, and that just makes me smile. I mean, yeah, that's the, it certainly looked that way, that Ohio State season might be over, but look, Day right now, if Day, with what Day has done so far in the playoffs, they win it all, he'll be the best game manager entering 2025. There's no question about it, I don't think. Maybe Kirby. Kirby could be ahead of him for sure. Oh my gosh. Oh man, touchdown Jesus about to convert to Islam. That's hilarious. You are a great content creator. I love you, but at some point the Michigan fan always comes out of you. I love it, and I will always love you, bro. Does it? I mean, I don't think I said anything that was incorrect. Basically what I keep saying in this video is that Texas could have won it, but they didn't. I don't know where you're getting the Michigan fan thing from me. I literally just said that Steve Sarkisian's not a good game manager and Day is. I also legitimately just said that Quinn Ewers is a worse QB than Will Howard. Like, not everyone agrees with those points. Not everyone does. Not everyone. And just stop it. Although I appreciate you saying that you love the channel. But at the end of the day, come on. Like, I literally have said that Ohio State's the best team in the country, that you have an elite game manager, that you outcoached Texas. That's the highest compliment I can give you, and that you were the best team on the field. How am I being biased against you? How? Seriously, answer the question. Same with Tony in the chat. How am I being biased toward Ohio State? I picked you to beat Tennessee. I picked you to lose to Oregon, but then I turned around and picked you to beat Texas in a close game, which is exactly what happened. Oh, you're talking about earlier. Okay. Well, that's just my opinion. Jay, from my perspective, what I'm saying would actually help OSU. I'm not trying to hurt OSU. From my opinion, Jake, if Ohio State treated the Michigan game differently, you'd start beating them more because you have the better roster. And outside of 2023, you've always had the better roster than Michigan. Even in the Cooper years, you had better rosters than Michigan did. Let's not forget that. That's all I'm saying. I'm not like secretly making fun of OSU. I'm trying to give legitimate advice. It might be bad advice, probably is, because I'm not as smart as Ryan Day is about college football, probably not as smart as he is in general, or Steve Sarkisian, or any of these guys, to heck with it. But I do think there is some truth to the fact that Ohio State, like this year and in 2022, lost to Michigan because they didn't respect Michigan as much as Michigan respected them. And by respect, I don't mean in terms of like I pledge allegiance to the flag. I mean know your opponent, study your opponent, and treat your opponent like they're competent and not like they're idiots and you should crush them. That's what I'm talking about. N.O. Grant, Sam, I appreciate the collabs with Juck and Chris. Good work. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and have Juck on the channel on the channel. I've been on his channel twice. I'm probably going to try and have him on. And then, of course, I'll try and get Chris Drew on. It's X-Men. It's hard to explain, but we see the pendulum swing back and forth. Yeah, I get that. There are, of course, there are moments back and forth. I just thought that, like, the loss this year was kind of proof that, like, because think about it this way, Jay. If you respect Michigan and, like, that they're good certain things? Do you run inside zone like 25 times? No, you pass on them because you take him seriously. You take that D-line seriously. Yes, yeah, thank you. I'm not being biased against Ohio State here. I'm just saying this team's not one of the greatest teams of all time. It's like Michigan last year. Michigan did not have a single elite receiver last year, and they would give up one stupid long touchdown pass every game outside of the 2 playoff games. They're not a GOAT caliber team, but there aren't many GOAT caliber teams. It doesn't happen to every program. It doesn't. How will Manning be next year? How is he looking? I think he'll be about as good as Quinn through the air, maybe a little bit better, but he'll have better legs, and that alone will help their rushing offense exponentially, especially since they're going to get healthy at running back, and I think if they were healthier at running back, they'd be better on the ground this year. Matt Norsey, I don't like Notre Dame either. They feel like they don't have to join a conference like the rest of us, and I've always looked forward to those Michigan versus Notre Dame matchups. I wish we played Notre Dame this year so we could have beaten them. That would have been hilarious. Notre Dame lost to NIU, lost to Michigan, and they make a playoff run. That would be funny. That would be funny. That would be hilarious. Okay. We're going to get off at 2 a.m. I am going to... Oh, come on. Why is the chat crashing? I hate that. Why is it crashing? Oh, I don't like it. I might need a new PC. I don't know why my memory, sucks. This always happens with streams. I know it doesn't happen with others, too. Yeah, no, Jay. There's respect and I pledge allegiance, which rivals should never have that with each other. But then there's respect in Ohio State and Michigan should have the same respect with each other that Patton and Rommel had for each other. They fought for different armies. They were honestly trying to kill each other, but they respected each other and wrote admirably about each other because they knew their opponent. And that helped them to have good battles and prepare well. And it's felt like, especially in 22 and 24, that Day could care less about what Michigan is, and him and his team just think they should beat Michigan because we're Ohio State, rather than we should beat Michigan because we've prepared for them and done our homework. And that is very different. And I think if Ohio State changes their approach to the rivalry game, instead of believing... It feels like Ohio State right now believes, not the fans, again, I'm not insulting the fans, but the program believes that the Michigan game's a ritual. And at the end of the ritual, Ohio State always wins. And that's not what it is. The game is a battle. It's an annual war that will never end. It is an endless war, and you're just trying to win as many battles as possible. That is how the game should be approached. Not as this ritual where one team always wins or they simply run out of time, and if the game was longer, will we end up winning? That's all I mean. Yeah. Okay. Well, glad we could come to that understanding. That other guy who said I love my self-talk. I actually don't love my self-talking. I cringe whenever I hear my voice. It's not as bad as it used to be, but I don't like hearing myself talk, and I'm a perfectionist, and there's already several things about the stream and even some of the pauses I had in that segment that make me cringe. I don't love myself. I don't. Someone just said, I missed that in the chat. Someone said Brett Bielema pose. Oh, you know what? Oh no, he was referencing me. Okay. We still have 76 concurrent viewers, which is pretty impressive, I would say, for being live for, hour 54 minutes, which is pretty good. So if any of you guys, because I know many of you are still watching, if any of you have questions, send them in, and we'll get off here shortly. I'll just wait around for any potential questions. I don't know what that guy was saying when he said all teams have flaws, and then he left. Come on, man. But he did provide useful information that Jeremiah Smith got hurt. Never knew that. Yeah, but he was like, all teams have flaws. What do you mean? It's like 2019 Ohio State didn't have a flaw. Like that team did not have a flaw. LSU that year didn't really have a flaw either. Their defense wasn't perfect, but they didn't have a bad position group like Ohio State has with the O-line and special teams, and like Texas has with special teams, and at points this season like quarterback. For example, like, it's not biased to say this Ohio State team has some serious flaws. It's not. I don't get why the same. There were so many people clowning me for saying that Texas could win. Watch the game. I said that in my preview that they had a chance to win. They didn't win, but there is a world where they win. That's all I'm trying to say. It's not discrediting the win at all. That's not what's going on. In fact, those are the wins that often get the most credit. Like this win for Ryan Day, the Cotton Bowl win, is more important than the Rose Bowl win. It may not be as impressive, but it's a win that is one. It's a win that's another level up. Semifinal instead of quarterfinal, and it was a close game where especially coaching matters, and he won that game. So it's not discrediting OSU at all. I've said again and again and again, no one will care that you have 2 losses if you win it all. No one. Like, all that will matter for is if you want to make an argument that you're like the best team of all time or one of the best teams of the 21st century. And that really doesn't matter because college football is a year-to-year sport, especially now with the transfer portal. What's the worst case scenario for Ohio State next year? Oh, got a super chat. Okay, we got a super chat here. This guy wants to know something political of mine, so I'm going to try and keep it a little bit just bland, the answer, because I don't like revealing too many of what could be called social or political views. But this is Alec with a $5 super chat. Opinion on Marcus Freeman's response to question about being first black coach to bring a team to a championship game at the awards ceremony. I didn't see. Oh, no, I did. It was, I hope all minorities, black, brown, like white. I think he included like every ethnic group he thought he thought existed in that. I liked it. I liked it. I think that Freeman's a man of high character, and I think Freeman gets things. He's very sociable. He has a very that man has a high IQ. Like you can tell by the way he talks, by the way he carries himself, by how he functioned as a defensive coordinator. I liked the answer. I do. I think that America, and this is really the case with every nation, because you study history. We are in the most raceless period of human history right now. And that cosigns with our global trade, where we have the most global trade, and since more ethnic groups are constantly introduced to each other, there's a whole lot less tribalism now than there was 50 years ago, than there was 100 years ago, than there was 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. There just is. And I think the way to move forward from, whether you want to look at an American perspective and how, like, America did a very poor job, and that's putting it very lightly. They did an awful job, terrible job at treating people who they didn't classify as white, whatever that means, for most of their history. Or if you want to look at it from a world perspective, where humans have been tribalistic for centuries, for millennia, I think the best way to move past it is to say that, you're like what he said, like your color should not matter. Like the body of your work is what should matter. That's the most objective way to view people. And the most, ironically enough, that's the most open way to view people. The most open way for me to view any of you, whether you are white, whether you are black, whether you are Asian, whether you are a Martian, whether you are a Skrull, whether you are a droid, whether you are a, like, what's a person from Star Wars, just to further like state the point. Best way for me to treat you is just to, look at your body of work. That's the best way to look at things. So that's my opinion. Let me see what else. Oh yeah, well Jay, yeah, like we have nukes now, so yeah, a lot more people can die if a war erupts. But I'm talking about, yeah, like the feeling. But anyway, I don't like talking a lot of politics. I don't. So I just wanted to answer that question because I think that his answer was really good. It was really admirable. Better question to Money5675. Who does OSU target in the portal after the season's over? I think that, well, they're already targeting kind of most of who they want to target. I would say they're going to target a QB. I bet you they're going to get a quarterback. They didn't get Beck, though, and Beck had a no contact, so he was going to Miami from the get-go. Maybe they'll get Quinn Ewers. That would be pretty hilarious. I don't think that'd be a good move because I think Ewers behind an OSU O-line that probably won't be... Like next year's OSU O-line, I'll tell you right now, I'll probably view it... I'll expect it to be the same as this year's because OSU got 2 good tackles. Who else did they get? Exactly. They'll probably be a little bit worse at left tackle, maybe the same or a little bit better at right tackle, and just because of experience, they might be a little bit better on the interior. But this OSU O-line is not going to make like insane strides. Just probably not. It's probably not what's going to happen. Thank you for taking on the political question. No problem. I mean, I feel I'm obliged to answer super chats, and I don't want, to like cower away from things. If it's necessary, I will, but that wasn't necessary. That wasn't necessary to cower or hide away from. So you're welcome, Alec. Try not to ask so many of those. Like, just because I answered this one doesn't mean I'm like enthusiastically going to answer all of them. But like, if someone has something like that relating to like a relevant football topic, which it's Marcus Freeman, and Marcus Freeman's a really good head coach who's competing in the national championship, so it's relevant, I'll answer it. Now, if someone like just said $100 super chat who you voted for, well, joke's on you. You just donated me $100 and I'm not telling you who I voted for. Maybe I didn't vote. You won't know, but thank you for the $100. Okay. Already got some good transfers coming in. I think for Ohio State, it's more about hanging on to what they have. Bingo. Bingo, 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 bingo. Keep Jermaine Matthews Jr., who's a future All-American. Of course, keep Caleb Downs. If you can get Judkins back, I think that would be helpful because there's going to be a pretty hefty drop-off. Like C.J. Donaldson. C.J. Donaldson is nowhere close to Travion Henderson, and he's not as good as Quinshon Judkins. And James Peoples is not either because there's a reason he really only played in garbage time. Like, they have their work cut out for them at running back and O-line. They upgrade at tight end with Claire. Wide receiver, I don't know if wide receiver will be better. I think that it will still be elite, but we don't know if Brandon Innes or Carnell Tate next year will be as good as Emeka Ibuka. We won't know that. And at QB, there might be a drop-off because Sayin, look, guys, Sayin isn't as mobile as Howard is. So if the O-line isn't much better, he's going to have like a really, really difficult time next year. unless his arm is just that much better than Howard's in every way. And if it was right now, I probably think he'd be the starter. And then on defense, they lose a lot. I mean, Cody Simon's gone. All starters on the D-line are gone, and they've rotated, yes, but they lost, Mitchell Melton to the portal, and I don't think Ohio State's backups are as good as their starters. It's the same for any school. No school's backups are as good or better than their starters, unless you have alien players, like what Michigan had at D-tackle with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, and when they were freshmen, they were just rotational players, and they became full-on starters. Ohio State has started their 2 aliens already, and maybe there's another one in the mix, but they were willing to play Jeremiah Smith right out of the gate. So they from that perspective, that's actually pretty good. They just went straight to their alien talent, said, screw it. We're gonna let it rip. So I think that y'all have pretty good insight there. I agree with that. I think that holding on to as much of your remaining roster as you can, because Ohio State's losing a lot of seniors, a lot of graduates. They're going to lose some portal guys because it is what it is. And they need more bodies in the portal. I don't think they have enough in the portal, like especially at O-line. They need 2 more offensive linemen in the portal. Like, because they're losing 3 offensive tackles to the portal, and some of them were second stringers. They're losing 2 to the draft, technically 3 if you count Donovan Jackson moving to tackle. You gain 2 via the portal, and they may lose more offensive linemen. And they haven't recruited all that well, and they're not well coached. They're not. Like, I think Fry is an okay developer and probably a good schemer, good technique guy, but he's not really great from what I can tell at much. And I'm not saying that if I were a Michigan fan, guys, if I were biased, if I were a Clemson fan, if I were a Penn State fan, if I were an Oregon fan who was envious that you beat us in the Rose Bowl, I would want you to keep Fry. I would, because with how the trajectory of the O-line has gone in terms of depth, it keeps getting worse. It does. And you would much rather have special teams, or you would much rather have tight end be a glaring weakness. You'd much rather have running back even be a glaring weakness compared to the offensive line. You just would. Like, O-line is important. I'm saying that Fry should be replaced or do better because I'm an objective analyst. So therefore, I am going to say, from what my perspective tells me, is what would benefit OSU. Oh, yeah, you need a kicker. You need, you guys need a kicker. Let me see. Yeah, Michael Burnett. Yep, Ohio State needs they need a kicker. They need him. Need him. Guys, don't get too political in the chat. This is not a political channel. Never will be. Is the Big Ten the best conference around? This is the last question I will answer. Likely. No, it won't be, because someone just popped up another question that I think is pretty good. By the way, guys, like the video if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when we go live tomorrow. Yup. I think the Big Ten at the top is the best. I think that was the case last year too, where the top teams in the Big Ten were better than any of the top teams in the other conferences. But you look at depth, I think that the SEC is still deeper in terms of talent and average quality of team. I do think that. But people have denied this, that like the top of the Big Ten was not better than the top of the SEC. That failed this year, and last year that wasn't the case. Last year, if not for the Orange Bowl, which puffed up Georgia's numbers because the power ratings acted like Florida State didn't have a bunch of opt-outs, Ohio State was better than Georgia last year. Penn State for much of the year had a higher power rating than Georgia. Now, because of James Franklin, I would never pick Penn State of last year to beat Kirby Smart. But Penn State, in a lot of ways, roster-wise, was better in some ways than Georgia was last year, especially on the defensive side of the football. So, no, like, it depends. Like, top down, I don't think the Big Ten's the best conference. At the top, in terms of winning championships right now, absolutely. The Big Ten's at the best. That's just my opinion, though. Who should replace Fry? Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. Jim Milchizik, Michigan State, was Oregon State's O-line coach. He'd do pretty well. I think that you could get Phil Trautwein, although I don't think he'd leave Penn State, but he's a much better recruiter. Penn State's O-line was clearly better than OSU's this year. You could get... You could get Indiana's O-line coach. He's done a pretty good job. And Indiana can't pay him as much as OSU can. You get Minnesota's O-line coach. Minnesota does a good job churning out offensive linemen and having a good, good run game or good pass protection year over year over year over year. Joe Rudolph's not leaving Notre Dame. They'll pay him $1 billion to stay there, as they should. It's the same thing with Kyle Flood. Same with Stacey Searles. Hire Matt Luke from Clemson. You can pay more than Clemson. You have a bigger budget than Clemson. Slap a co-OC title on him. Well, okay, Heartline already has that, but you could probably have, 2 co-offensive coordinators. Slap it right there. And take him. Get Utah's O-line coach. Like, Utah's done a pretty good job on the O-line. So their problem's been a lot more skill position based. Get Iowa's O-line coach. They did a pretty good job this year. Trying to think who else. Rutgers. You can get Rutgers O-line coach. Not Alabama's. Chris Kaplovich is an idiot. Kansas State's O-line coach. They always produce good linemen. Whoever's the O-line coach at Kansas, that would be a good pickup. He'd be the cheapest because he's in the Big 12, but Kansas has done very well in the trenches almost every year under Lance Leipold. And I think this year showed it wasn't just a Kotelnicki thing because they ran the ball pretty well. They protected Jalen Daniels pretty well. There are a lot of O-line coaches who could do better than Justin Fry, especially with the support network that OSU has. Like, they're so good at so many different positions that, your unit doesn't have to carry the team like Kansas's or Iowa's or Minnesota some years or Michigan some years has had to carry the team. OSU doesn't have... See, two things can be true at once. OSU's O-line is bad, but their O-line doesn't have to do as much, so it doesn't matter as much. It might matter a whole lot as much as the others do in terms of winning it all, but it certainly doesn't matter as much in terms of getting to the playoffs every year or winning your conference or winning top 10 games here and there. This doesn't, because you have the best wide receivers coach in the country, you have the best receivers, and look, Ohio State is a physical team this year, and I believe that, along with the fact that I also believe their O-line isn't good, in part because of injuries, but also because their coach has not done a good job of recruiting and not a great job at developing. Like, they're physical. Their physicality's passing because their receivers can block and because their receivers break tackles. They get forward for extra yards. They're tough. They have energy. Their defense is physical. Only other team in terms of physicality that can match them on defense is maybe Notre Dame if healthy, and definitely Texas. That's it. How bad could your O-line possibly be and you just march through the playoffs through 3 top 15 teams, 2 of them top 5, 1 of them undefeated? Well, what I will say, the caveat to my statement about Ohio State is their O-line in reality isn't bad for college football. It's bad relative to their expectations. Like, relative to the recruits they have, like they have a 5-star, 3 4-stars, and a 3-star. the fact they have that much talent on the starting O-line, and they have like all the receivers, the QB, and the defense they do, and they struggle to run the football, is indicative of a poor O-line relative to the talent that is there. In reality, for the Power 4, Ohio State probably has like a below average to average O-line. In terms of all 134 or 135 FBS teams, Ohio State probably has an above average O-line. So I say bad because by Ohio State standards, it is. And by top 25 team standard, it is. But it's not horrific. It's not horrific at all. How can you play good, be a good pass blocking team, but still get an overall bad rating of bad O-line? Because they're good at pass blocking, but they're not good at run blocking. I don't think it's that hard. And they have really good receivers. So they have really good receivers who no one can cover. So Will Howard rarely has to be in the pocket for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds because no secondary is good enough to cover Jeremiah Smith. And few secondaries are good enough to decipher the play calls that Ohio State has. Like that, I hope you get that what I'm saying is not as big of an insult as what it may come across as. But I also see that you're not a fan of Fry. So I think we're more in agreement than disagreement. Again, I don't think the unit nationally out of 134 FBS teams is bad. But look at how Ohio State's ran the ball ever since the Oregon game when Simmons went down, and look at their PFF grades, and look how much push they get on the line, especially since McLaughlin went down. They're not disgusting. Of course they're not. Otherwise I would flat out say that. But they are not playing up to the Blocko standard. Not even close. How many touchdowns did Ohio State run for today? A lot. But you know what set up those touchdowns? Passes by Will Howard. Donovan Jackson is a GOAT. Yes, he is. Donovan Jackson switched from guard to tackle, and he's playing out of his mind. He's good. Is he going to be a first rounder? I know he's going to be a second rounder. He's definitely a day 2 guy. Probably should be a day 1 guy with how versatile he is. The fact he can play both tackle and guard, not a skill that almost any offensive lineman at those positions has. That's pretty insane. Yeah, he's awesome. He's their best offensive lineman. It's not even close. What I'm saying is it doesn't make sense that you can play good, be a good offensive blocking team, and even if you aren't a great run blocking team, you'd still get an overall offensive line grade of bad. As I've mentioned earlier, and maybe this is just a disconnect that I'll have to live with, it's the fact that Will Howard has legs, so he can maneuver in the pocket. He can juke out defenders who are coming at him. He can make improvised throws, like the one off of his back where he backpedaled and got it to Carnell Tate, or he backpedaled and got it to Travion Henderson across the other field. Those are good throws. Not most QBs can't make those throws. He does a lot to compensate for the O-line, and it's why he's one of the best QBs in the country. And Ohio State had to change their entire blocking scheme just to run for 3.5 yards per carry, because man to man, they don't block well. And a huge part of the reason why their pass protection is so good is very few teams are going to send 6 or 7 guys in a blitz toward them, because if they do, they're going to give up a first down because the receivers are that good. And Texas's offensive line is not the greatest either. It isn't. But their job is harder because they don't have the same receivers. Their QB isn't mobile, so he can't compensate for their ineptitude as much. And their running backs aren't as good. Like, Quintravion Wiesner and Jaden Blue are not even close to Quinshon Judkins and Henderson. How do you project Will Howard in the NFL? I'm not an NFL guy, but I'd say he's playing himself into being like a day 3 guy instead of an undrafted free agent. Michael Burnett, who has the better run game next week? Oh, this is tricky. Notre Dame is so much better at running the ball than OSU is. The problem is everyone can stack the box against Notre Dame because their passing offense doesn't scare anyone. Very few can stack the box against, like Texas. Texas never stacked the box against OSU. Why? Because you do, you're dead. You're dead. You're dead, which is like, it just is. If you stack the box against OSU, unless you have aliens everywhere at DB, you will lose. That's not how you defend them. Who has the better running backs? Who has the better running game? That is a good question that will get answered. Ohio State has the better backs right now, especially right now with how Love and Price have been a little bit banged up. Ohio State's running backs are second to none. The only duo that might be better than Henderson and Judkins are Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, and I would disagree with that on the sole principle that Singleton and Allen have a much better run-blocking O-line than Judkins and Henderson do, and yet Judkins and Henderson statistically are pretty close, and on film are pretty close, if not better, than Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. So, yeah, I think who has the better run game next week? Who has it overall? It's Notre Dame. Who has the better rushing statistics in game? I'd be tempted to say OSU, because I think that Notre Dame won't stack the box against Ohio State, or maybe they do, but I don't know how well it will work. And I think that I think at some point Ohio State's offense will wear down the defense of Notre Dame, because their defense should likely be on the field forever. So that's my opinion here. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all. I know that like Jay, Michael Burnett, N.O. Grant, I know you all have been in here forever. Ryan Day's Beard, go Buckeyes. I can't say it too loud because my parents are asleep downstairs, but go Buckeyes, Ryan Day's Beard. Good to see you in here. Very good to see you in here. I know that you're very happy. You should be very happy. Your team is probably going to win the national championship. It's incredible. OSU's defense will break Notre Dame offense. Yeah. That should happen. That should happen. Easily. Easily. That should happen. Will it? I don't know, because you have to see how things play out, but I do think that OSU's defense. I think the only way Notre Dame wins is if they hold OSU's, if they do what Texas did, and I don't know if they can because their run defense isn't as good. And I think Texas's defense overall is better than Notre Dame's. Jay Burke, I can't exactly see Notre Dame's offense lighting it up. Yeah. I can't see that either. Really struggle to see that. Okay, guys. Well, it's 2:22. Oh, $5 super chat. Thank you, N.O. Grant, for the $5 super chat. Thanks for all the content, dude. Go Buckeyes. You're welcome for all the content. You're welcome. Go Buckeyes. Go Buckeyes. Go win a national championship for the Big Ten. Jay Burke, we love you, Sam. You are the best. I mean that from the heart. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. Michael Burnett needs some luck of the Irish for win. Yeah, Notre Dame will need something that goes their way. They will need that. Only way Notre Dame wins it is if they do what Michigan did in 2022. Yeah, that's a fair point. Just get some, if they're able to scheme, it will require a ton of big plays by Notre Dame, most of which should probably be schemed open. It'll also, I think part of it might require a off game from OSU too. If OSU brings their A game, I don't think Notre Dame wins this one. And that's the difference between what I thought about Ohio State versus Texas and what I thought about them versus Oregon. Is in those games, Oregon, no. But like, if Ohio State played their A game, there's not a guarantee they beat Texas because Texas's A game may have beaten OSU's A game. Neither, I don't think either team, by the way, played their A game tonight. Both played about the same level, like probably high B level, mid B level. They could have played better, had a lot of drops and penalties, of course. But Notre Dame is much more limited than Texas is. They are. Like, their defense isn't quite at the same level, and they don't have the same athletes on offense that Notre Dame does. So, yeah. But what I will say is my initial reaction to that 9.5 point spread is that's too big of a number, because the power ratings say Notre Dame's very good, and power ratings aren't flukish when they have this large of a sample size. So I don't think Ohio State will win a blowout, but I do think they will win, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So I'll see you guys very soon. Peace. Have a good night. I love what we're doing here on College Football with Sam, and I can't wait until this channel hits 6 figures in subscribers. I'll see you all very soon. Thank you again for the super chats. Bye-bye.